Hello there everyone. Today I want to show you how to make this Hugs and Kisses wirework bracelet. And this is what mine looks like here. So I've used two different colours of wire to get this effect as well. We kind of have the silver wire is the hugs there, so almost O's all the way around, where you have the copper wire are these X's inside of them. So what it really is it's the same pattern on both sides here, so if you reverse it there, but because I used the two different colours, on the other side you have the X's and the outside border, but on this side it's the opposite way around with the colours, but the exact same pattern otherwise. So that's how you get this effect. So I'm going to show you how to make this, so if you want to learn it then keep watching. So these are the materials that we'll need. First of all, here we need our wire, and I'm using two different colours of the same one. This is regular round coated copper wire. I've got a copper and then a silver one, and these are both 0.6mm in the thickness in the gauge, so you can use this or you can use a different gauge as well. For instance 0.8, the only thing is the difference it's going to make is how wide the bracelet is, if that's what you're making, so that's really up to you and your preference. And then here I have my findings that I want to finish off my bracelet with. So I've got my ribbon ends here to finish it off nicely, and then I've got my findings, so extended chain, a lost or claw clasp, and then some jump rings as well. You can choose whatever kind of closure and clasp that you want to. So let's get it all together and let's get started. So then to get started we'll need to cut some lengths of wire, and what I have here is 15 lengths in total of my wire of 50 centimeters each. So I've got the two colours, but in total there's 15 of each colour. I have, in this case, 8 lengths of my copper, and then I have 7 lengths of my silver, but obviously it's up to you how you want yours to be. So these are the wires that we're going to need. So I've then taken all my lengths of wire here and I've added them into the spring clamp just to help hold the ends together, and also so they're in the right position. So just use something like this, or you can use something else, just to make it nice and convenient, especially at the beginning here when starting out, so all the wires are sitting how we want to. So as you can see here as well, I've added them in a certain way. I also just want to mention, make sure your wires before you do this are as nice and straight as possible and no kinks. By that, they don't have to be fully straight, they can have a curve to them, that's fine, but make sure there's no kinks or bends and that, because obviously that's going to then end up showing in the braid. So add your wires in, and then what I've done is I separated them how I want the final piece to be, and I've set them like this. So I've done groups of 3 wires each here. So each group of 3 wires is going to basically work as one strand, you could say, when making the braid type it is. So what I've done is the outside groups, so 3 wires here on each side are silver, the next 3 on each side, so the next group in, a copper, and the very middle group here has got the silver wire in the middle and then a copper wire on each side of that one, and that forms the middle group. And that's how I've added my wires. Obviously how you want to is completely up to you. So then to start making the braid, the beginning is going to be the most fiddly part until we kind of get going and find a rhythm, but just kind of do what you can do until you find that rhythm, and it's also going to get much easier to do then, because we're going to have a bit of work done and the wires aren't going to be moving around as much. So what I'm going to do first of all is just take the 2 outer groups and just kind of bring them out a little bit to open up space a bit here. And obviously we're working with wires, so it's going to be quite different than working with cord, so just bear that in mind. So we have that middle group in the middle coming straight down, and that's always going to just be coming straight down the middle. That doesn't move from side to side, it's only the other groups here that do that. So what we're going to do is start from the outside. So I'm going to start on my right side, bring that, the whole group of 3, and make sure they always lie flat next to each other. Bring that over the next group, so the silver one in my case goes over the copper one and in towards the middle, like that. And then we need to bring it underneath the middle group there. Again, making sure everything stays nice and flat next to each other, all the single wires in all the groups. So bring it into the middle like this. And also most likely, the beginning part is going to be the least even part, because we need to just, like I said, find the rhythm first. So always allow yourself a kind of space. Maybe you're going to end up cutting that off because you just need to get into it, and then it's going to get much more even as we get further on. So that's then brought that silver group from the right side into the middle. Then we need to bring the same group but on the other side, so the other outside group here, in my case silver again, into the middle as well. So that also needs to go over the copper group on that side and then into the middle, and I'm just bringing it over that silver one as well. And then we also need to come underneath that middle group where I have both my silver and my copper in that group. And just bring it to the other side. So now the silver groups have swapped places basically with the copper ones. So now the copper ones are the outside ones. So this is the beginning. Bring it all the way over. Make sure you kind of keep working with your wires. As you keep moving them, also make sure you keep straightening them out, because as you're working with them, they're probably going to get a little bit bent from the warmth of your fingers and that. So just keep kind of smoothing them out, especially the area here that you're working with. So once it gets into the braid, it's not going to get too obvious if there's a bend or anything. So just keep smoothing them out. So that's the beginning here, the first movement that we've done. I'm just going to open it up a little bit. So that's that. So now we need to start with the copper ones. So to do that, you can see, like I said, they're now in the outside groups, and also they're coming underneath the silver groups because we cross the silver ones over right at the top. So kind of the step prior to this. So what that means is the copper groups are the ones we're going to move next. Start with one side. It doesn't really matter what side you start with on either of them, as long as you stay consistent throughout, because that's what's going to also help end up affecting how the braid looks. So I'm going to always just start from my right side, and it's coming underneath from the previous section, so that means it's always got to go underneath the next group in. So instead of going over the next group like we just did with the silver, the copper one here goes underneath and becomes the next one in. Bring that in there. But before we do that, the middle group here, just want to remember, you just want to press that down a little bit. Make sure they're still lying flat next to each other, because we want to make sure to give that spacing. And I like to try and get the braid as tight as possible, which is when we're working with wire, we have to kind of account for that by then. I'm just pressing that down a little bit to make sure it gets as tight as possible, because wire obviously doesn't work the same way as cord. So like that. So I then take my copper one here, I just brought it under the silver one, and then we need to bring it over the middle group, over to the other side, and like that. Bring it all the way over, and then on the other side we need to do the same. So the outside copper group needs to go underneath the next one, which in my case is the silver, making sure along the way I keep all the groups nice and flat. And in this case it also needs to go over the middle group, and I'm also just going to bring it over the copper one that I just brought over. And it doesn't really matter whether you go over or under there now, just make sure once you decided in this case you stay consistent throughout, and bring it over to the other side here, just like that. And there again you can see that your groups have now swapped place. So now the silver ones are the outside ones again. And there we go. So that's kind of a little bit the beginning part now. So now we're going to go back to the silver groups, because they're now the outside ones. But before we do that and move any of them, the middle group here, previously I pressed it downwards because we brought these outside groups over. The silver groups now, the outside ones, need to go under, which means I want to just press the middle group up a little bit to give more space to bring them underneath when we're bringing them in here, just to get it as tight as possible, like I said. So like that. So what we then need to do with this is the same that we did before. Like I said, bring them into the middle, but in the right direction. So because my silver ones are the ones that are going to be on top, I always want to make sure to do that throughout now to keep it consistent. So I'm just going to separate out my strand here of my 3 wires lying flat next to each other. And what we want to do with this is the opposite of what we just did with the copper, but the same we did first time with the silver. So this needs to go over, in my case, the copper group, so the next one in, and then it needs to go under the one in the middle, just like it did up here. You can see that previously. So that's why we then pressed the middle group upwards as well. Let's get everything in place. Bring that over the first group and under the middle group, making sure they stay lying flat next to each other. Both the group that you're moving, but also the groups you're going over and under. Just like that. Just take your time, get it into place, and then that's one side, so it just stays here then right next to the middle group, because then we need to take the outer one from the other side, needs to go under the next, go over, sorry, the next group as well. And then we need to bring it under the middle group. And I'm just going to go over the one I just brought over, again staying consistent, because that's what I did previously. So just make sure everything crosses over and under in the same way every time. And bring that under there. And over to the other side. And then just make sure the middle is still lying nice and flat, and it is there. And then we can also tighten it up a little bit. So just tighten it, maneuver everything in place how you want it to sit. And then we have basically the first little section done there with the silver part. And then we just want to keep going like this. So now the copper ones again are the outside ones, so that means we've got to do them next. So that means they've got to go underneath, because it's the copper one, it's kind of the underneath layer. So that means to get them underneath the next one here, they need to go over the middle one. So I'm going to just press this down first of all, just a little bit to give that space. And then we need to start with one side. I'm starting with my right side all the time, and I need to bring it under the first group, so the silver one in my case, into the middle and over that middle group that we pressed downwards. Make sure it lies nice and flat. And then the same thing with the other side. Make sure they're nice and flat, and then bring them underneath the next group and then over the middle group. And I'm also going over the one that I just brought over, because that's what I did last time, you can see there. So they cross over in the same way. And bring it all the way over. Just like that. And there we have a full first copper one as well. You can see that actually lies underneath the silver one. So that's what it's going to look like. And then you swap places again with your groups. So you just got to keep going like this. The outside ones are now the silver ones, and they're the ones on top. So remember, that means the middle one needs to be pushed up, so we can bring them under the middle one. And then we do that by bringing, I'm going to start with my right one again, bring that over the next group, into the middle and underneath that middle group. Like that. And the other side goes over the next group and underneath the middle group. And I'm just going over that one I just brought over as well. And bring it all the way over. Again, just take a bit of time, tighten it up if you need to, and try and get into a rhythm now and find your rhythm of how you're going to stay consistent and get it as neat throughout as possible, really. So kind of keep an eye on the one you just made. Is it similar to the previous one? And just keep going like that. And there we go, and your wires are swapped place again. And you just want to keep going like this, obviously. Making sure your groups stay nice and flat next to each other. And also that middle one. So I always keep my silver one, because that's the middle one of the middle group. Make sure that stays in the middle. And then it's going to look a little something like this. You always want to keep doing this then. Swapping. Always taking the outside ones, bringing them in, and then the other ones become the outside ones, and you make these little circles with your X's there, kind of, you could say, in the middle, and that's how you then build this. So keep doing this until you either reach the length that you want, or you used up all the wire, because you might want to then choose the nicest part of your braid, even if it's longer than what you need. You've got more, so you can choose the nicest part to then use that. So keep doing this. So I now kept braiding here all the way to the end, and I have a long length. You can see it looks like that. And then what I also just want to mention is what we need to do now is obviously cut it down. But if you want to make more than one length, I recommend making a longer length of braid, just a continuous one, and then cut it down into sections from that, rather than making one section per piece that you want. Because what you then do is cut down one end, measure the length, then cut the other end, and then you go straight into cutting the next section. That way you save a lot of wire, so you have far less wastage on it. So this is then the braid itself. Then what we need to do now, like I said, is actually cut down the end. So I'm just going to go straight on this end first, get rid of the excess wire here. And what you just want to do is get some wire cutters or flush cutters and cut straight across, basically in a straight line. Just taking a few at a time. Just getting kind of almost like one group at a time, you could say. And cut through them. And do that all the way across, from one side to the other. So now that I cut off the excess wire there, I pretty much have a straight edge all the way across. So that's going to fit perfectly inside of the ribbon end there, just nicely without adding too much bulk in it. So obviously we want to cut off the full length that we need. So you want to then just measure the length that you want your final piece to be if it's a bracelet. So say if you need it 7 inches or 7.5, just taking into account obviously the clasp you're going to add is going to add some length as well. So I'm going to add these at the end, but then I'm going to have a clasp between them. So just take that into account when measuring the length of your actual piece here. So you want to just cut that through, measure, cut it straight through just like I did on that end with your cutters, and then once you've done that, we're then ready to use these ribbon ends. So then when you have your piece ready here, what we want to do is take a ribbon end, and I also like taking some glue because it gives it that extra hold and durability in the long run. And what I want to do is add some glue inside of the ribbon end here before I clamp it down. All the way the sides inside here. You don't need to add too much because obviously we're clamping it down, so it's just going to come spilling out anyway, but just a decent amount on both sides. Just a little bit here, like that. And then I also like to add just a little bit on the end here. Just so it gets right in between the wires there, and then when we put the two pieces together it bonds nicely. So the glue is in between the wires, it makes it stronger and more durable as well. And then we add this on to the end. Make sure all the wires are inside of the ribbon end. And then I keep hold of the sides. Then I take a pair of flat nose pliers here. Make sure to have my piece in the middle of the ribbon end, and I start clamping this down. Now I just like to do it gently a bit at a time, moving from side to side until I'm almost all the way down with it. So before I make my final squeeze, I like to check that it's still in the middle, so it's not slipped to one side more than the other. But then I go in and do a final squeeze and make sure it's nice and tight. Just like that. And I always like to go in from the sides as well. And you might have a bit of glue spilling out. You can see here this dries clear, so it's fine, but also you can just wipe off the excess. I'll let it dry a bit and then pick it off. So you just gotta let that dry. Obviously do the same thing with the other end, and then once you've done that, all that's left to do is make it the shape that we want it. So now I've finished off both ends here, and I've also just attached my clasp, so like that, and my extended chain. So what we're going to do now is make this the shape that we want. So you can either bend this around something that has the size and shape you want it to be, or you can just use your fingers here. So what I like to do is kind of go in a bit from the middle, and then I go from side to side, gradually giving it more and more of a curve here. So I don't go in one place and make a big bend because that'll make it out of shape. So just go from side to side, and then it'll be gradually more and more curved before you reach the point where the two ends here are going to end up meeting, and you then have your bracelet shape. Now personally I prefer to do more of an oval shape rather than a round, because I feel it sits better on the wrist and it's also more comfortable, but you can also make it however you want to. So keep going like that until you have the two ends meeting, getting closer and closer here. Just do the ends a bit more in towards each other. And obviously in this case I attached my clasp as well, so my findings. And then once you're pretty much there, you can then just use them, and then that'll be your lock for the bracelet. And then there you have it. So it's now ready to wear. So that's what it looks like. Give it the shape that you want, obviously. And then there you have your finished bracelet. So that's what it looks like. So a pretty simple technique in the braid here, and obviously you can make it look different ways depending how you combine your wires or colours. But you get this kind of X's inside the O's, so almost X's and O's, hugs and kisses look to it all the way around. And also what you could do before bending it here, it is technically reversible because the two sides are the same but just with a different colour in the opposite position. So you could really choose which one you prefer to be outward, and then obviously decide that before you start shaping it here. But that's what it looks like. Otherwise you have that background colour on the sides and the X's instead. That's completely up to you. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and thank you very much for watching.